Here's the thing about the summer model race. Everyone assumed the big flagship would keep winning, and then on the last day of July, DeepSeek quietly shipped a model that is smaller than its own flagship and beats it on the benchmarks that matter for agents. It is called DeepSeek-V4-Flash, build 0731. The weights are on Hugging Face under an MIT license, and it serves 1 million tokens of context for 14 cents. Let's unpack what actually changed, because it is not the architecture. Look, the cleanest way to see this model is to follow a single token through it, from the sparse layer that picks the experts all the way out to the price you pay. Start with the shape. This is a mixture of experts model holding roughly 284 billion parameters in total, but only about 13 billion of them fire for any given token. That sparsity is the whole economic trick, because you pay to store a very large model while paying to compute a fairly small one. Next comes the window. DeepSeek gives this build a context of 1 million tokens, which is what makes it usable as an agent rather than a chat box. An agent that reads a repository, runs a tool, reads the output, and keeps going will burn through context fast, so the window is really a limit on how long the agent can stay coherent. Here is the part people keep missing. DeepSeek describes Flash as a repost-trained version of the preview it shipped back in April, rather than a new architecture. The bones did not change. What changed was the post-training, and that alone is what moved the agentic scores. Finally, it reaches the meter. The published API price is 14 cents per million input tokens and 28 cents per million output tokens, and the endpoint now speaks the response's API format natively and has been adapted to work with codecs. Cheap weights are interesting, but a cheap endpoint that drops into existing agent tooling is what gets adopted. So why does a smaller model beating a bigger one actually matter? Put the old assumption next to what this release demonstrates. Most of us still carry this reflex. When a lab ships a family, we assume the ranking follows parameter count, so the flagship is the real model and everything below it is a budget compromise. DeepSeek just published results where the smaller Flash build beats the larger V4 Pro preview on every agentic benchmark it reported, which breaks that ordering. Now flip it. Because the architecture was frozen and only the post-training changed, the improvement isolates cleanly. For agentic behavior, meaning tool calls, long horizons, and recovering from failure, the recipe appears to matter more than raw size. That is genuinely useful to know when you are choosing which model to fine-tune or deploy. Strip the release back and 3 things make it consequential. The license is doing heavy lifting here. Publishing under MIT means you can host these weights yourself, modify them, and ship them commercially without negotiating anything. When agentic capability arrives under a permissive license, the question for a lot of teams stops being which vendor and starts being which data center. Then there is where it wins. DeepSeek's claim is specifically about agentic benchmarks, not general knowledge trivia. Worth being precise about that, because agentic evaluation is still young and every lab picks its own suite. Treat it as a strong signal about tool use rather than as a universal ranking. And then the meter resets. Serving 1 million token context at 14 cents per million input tokens pushes the floor down for everyone else offering long context agents. Prices like this change which products are even viable, because a workflow that reads a whole codebase on every run stops being an accounting problem. Alright, let's lock in what DeepSeek-V4-Flash actually tells us. The Flash build from DeepSeek is a mixture of experts model with roughly 284 billion total parameters and about 13 billion active per token, a 1 million token context, and weights published on Hugging Face under an MIT license. It is not a new architecture. DeepSeek describes it as a repost-trained version of the April preview, which means the gains isolate almost entirely to the post-training recipe rather than to anything structural. The headline claim is that this smaller build beats the larger V4 Pro preview on every agentic benchmark the lab published, which quietly breaks the assumption that the biggest checkpoint in a family is always the strongest one. and it lands at 14 cents per million input tokens and 28 cents out, with native responses API support and codecs compatibility. If you like having releases like this taken apart properly, come spend a few minutes with us over at Standarity.com.